Good morning, colleagues. I hope you are doing fine this morning.
Good morning.
It's 10 o'clock. I just want to check if we have Mr. M. Klasso.
Yes, good morning. Good morning. It's Masugudalek Klasso speaking. I am on the line. I'm with Dr. Baloyi. I'm just trying to make sure that he forwards my presentation to you. I forwarded it to him.
Okay, no, thank you very much. I saw Advocate Pindela and also Dr. Gabriel. Do we have Dr. Gabriel? Are you around? Are you on the platform?
Good morning, Prof. Yes, I'm here.
Oh, thank you very much. We are now starting with our program. The National Parliament, National Council of Provinces, University of Venda community led by Vice Chancellor and Principal. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. In most cases, Parliament is regarded as a house of politicians from various political parties that have won contested elections. Majority of electorates do not even bother to follow up on the roles of the people they have elected. Even elected politicians do not even bother to consult their constituencies regarding the work they are doing in Parliament. In despair, electorates sometimes think that politicians have table manners. They make a lot of noise before they are elected. After elections, when they are in Parliament, they eat quietly. After 5 years, they appear again, making noise, calling, vote for us, vote for me, I will bring you water, roads, and electricity. University of Venda has realized that it is time to implement its 2021-2025 strategic plan. Univen is a leader in engaged scholarship. There are three thrusts embedded in the strategic plan, which this webinar is all about. They are engaged scholarship, governance, and partnership and linkages. University cannot stand alone. It is part of society, hence its engagement with Parliament today. Julius Kambarage Mwalimu Nyerere said, open quote, a man who calls his kinsmen to a feast does not redeem them from starving. They all have food in their own houses. When we gather in the moonlight at a village around, it is not because of the moon. Everyone can see it from his own compound. We come together because it is good for kinsmen to do. Therefore, let us continue with this team spirit and enjoy the power of togetherness. Let us smile not because we do not have problems, but because we are stronger than the problems. Alone I can smile, but together we can laugh. Alone I can enjoy, but together we can celebrate. Alone I can talk about together, but together we can speak. Let us promote things that unite us than things that cause disunity. Close quote. To the National Parliament and National Council of Provinces, you are not alone. We are here as a university to advance needed research. Let us come together because it is good for kinsmen to do. With these few words, this webinar is officially opened. I will now give this opportunity Dr. H. Baloyi, postdoctoral fellow and interim coordinator of the center. Dr. Baloyi, introduce the guests. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Program Director. Maybe for the benefit of those who are not aware, let me start off by indicating that our Parliament is divided into two houses. We have the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the Secretary to the NA, which is the National Assembly. We have Mr. M. Klasso. The Secretary to the NCOP, Secretary, we have Advocate M. Pindela. So that is the Secretary of the Second House of Parliament, Advocate Pindela. But then the third person that I'm going to introduce, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Division Manager, Dr. L. Gabriel. who is responsible for knowledge management and information services. These are my former colleagues, my former bosses, and they're going to be doing the presentations today. But also allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you the Vice Chancellor and the Principal of the University, Dr. P. Ntambeleni. Of course, we have several colleagues who have joined this webinar. I'm not going to mention them by names, but please just feel that you're part of this webinar. Program Director, I think that's all in short that I had to do in terms of introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baloyi, for introducing the guests. Now it is time for me to call upon Vice Chancellor and the Principal of University of Venda, Dr. Bernard Ntambeleni, to give us welcoming remarks. Dr. Ntambeleni, time is yours.
Thank you, Program Director. Secretary of the National Assembly, Mr. Tasso. The Secretary of the National Council of Provinces, Advocate Pindela. The Division Manager of the Knowledge Management and Information Services, Dr. Gabriel. Executive Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Social Science and Education, Prof. Bantwini. University of Venda Senior and Executive Management, the Director of the Community Engagement, Professor Nechandam, Director of the Institute for Rural Development, Professor Francis, a postdoctoral fellow and the interim director of the center, Dr. Baloyi, and also Univen staff and students, ladies and gentlemen. It is my profound pleasure to welcome you this morning at the University of Venda as we host this very important web-based seminar under the theme Towards a Stakeholder-Owned Center for Legislative Research and Advocacy. The Strategic Plan 2025 of the Department of Higher Education and Training identifies key medium-term outcomes that it seeks to achieve. One of these outcomes is that of building a responsive post-school education and training system. Informed by the white paper for post-school education and training, and also building on the expanded, effective and integrated post-school education and training system, the National Development Plan, and the other national research strategies, the University of Venda has identified 4 strategic thrusts in our 2021-2025 strategic plan. 2 of these strategic thrusts seeks to strengthen the university local, regional, and international profile and visibility through what we define as engaged scholarship and building the link of linkages, partnerships, and also internationalization. In line with the above strategic imperatives, the University of Venda is in the process of establishing a new research center that seeks to respond to the research needs of the legislative sector. This will be a university-based research center that is mandated to strengthen and support the work of the legislative sector through the provisioning of independent, non-partisan, but constructive research products and advocacy for the public participation in the work and programs of the legislative sector. As the literature suggests, the legislative sector remains relatively under-researched and neglected insofar as independent and peer-reviewed research is concerned. And it is for this reason that as the University of Venda, we are establishing this research center. There is a proposal for this research center to be named after the first Speaker of the National Assembly of the Democratic Parliament of South Africa, Dr. Frene Ginwala. However, this will be confirmed once communication process with Dr. Ginwala has been concluded. This webinar,
okay, because I think my speech, okay.
This webinar is the beginning of engagement that the Investor Venda seeks to have the Parliament, Provincial Legislatures, Municipality Councils, SADC Parliamentary Forum, and the Pan-African Parliament, which we hope will result in a formalized partnership in the near future. In his 2021 State of the Nation address, the President of the country, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, stated the following, and I quote, "Rebuilding our country requires a common effort. It requires that all South Africans take responsibility to play their part. Let us work together as government, as business, as labor, as political parties, and as all of society to clear the way, the rubble, and lay a new foundation," a close quote. With these few words, Program Director, allow me to extend my profound word of welcome to our colleagues in Parliament, members of the Provincial Legislatures, Municipality Councils, and the members of the Investor Venda community for their attendance. On behalf of the University Chancellor, the Executive Management, and the University community, I welcome you to this important webinar that is hosted by the Investor Venda. Let's have a progressive, constructive, and fruitful engagement. And I thank you. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor and Principal of University of Venda, Dr. Tamberin, for welcoming all of us. We're now proceeding to the next item where I will call upon Professor V.O. Nechendama, Director Community Engagement, to give purpose of this webinar. Professor Nechendama.
Thank you, Program Director. To the Vice Chancellor of the University, Dr. Tamberin, the Executive Dean of the School of Human and Social Sciences, and to our esteemed members of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, and the officials, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, students, good morning. Today, indeed, is one of its kind that begins to showcase our commitment to knowledge co-production, relevance, and intentions for utilization. As we begin the first webinar, may I just reiterate the purpose of today in the context of the unity of purpose between the University of Venda and the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. It is indeed an important webinar where we begin to share the insights, the reflections, our stakeholder perceptions according to what is it that really matters. How might we begin to probe and understand it better? How might we begin to make the production of knowledge useful to our society? And so as we come to this platform today, we utilize it as a way of exchanging ideas and focus in terms of where should we be going? How should we be probing? So that we may, at the end, claim that we are providing the evidence that is useful as a university, that is useful to the Parliament, that is useful to the beneficiaries. And so I am privileged to be reminding colleagues as we are going to be listening to our esteemed colleagues from the Parliament that we instill in the conversation an inquiry about what really matters. And how would we know when we know? And who says this is the right way to go? And if we do that, we will begin to realize that there shall be many of these kinds of conversation and sharing and interaction. I believe at the end of today, we will have a clear focus on what the center should be doing, how it should be doing, and how will we evaluate our impact. And with that, it will be indeed a great few hours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nechandaba, for giving purpose of this webinar. Like I said before, some of electorates like ourselves, we don't understand the role of Parliament. Now it is time to give Mr. Kaso, who is Secretary of National Assembly, to give us overview of the work of the National Assembly and how can we get in as researchers. Mr. Kaso, time is yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Mashao, Program Director. With your permission, I will show my face briefly, but because of network challenges, I may not be able to sustain that. Again, I want to thank you so much, Professor Mashao. I want to thank Professor Tamarin, the Vice Chancellor, Professor Nechandamu, and the University of Venda community at large for this opportunity. And also greeting my colleagues, my co-presenters, and all the guests, even those who might be joining us from the provinces. Indeed, my name is Masebula Lekaso. I am Secretary to the National Assembly. I've been Secretary for just over 7 years now. I started at the very critical time just before 2014. You might be aware that since 2014, the National Assembly has been a very busy house. So that's me. I had sent my presentation. I just want to check if it was received so that it could be displayed. Otherwise, I'm happy to go on. I'll be guided by you, Professor Mashao, in that regard.
I haven't received it. I think, Dr. Baloyi, if you have it, can you share with us?
Actually, it has been forwarded to Mr. Muraro Masisi. I think he should be able to display it.
Okay, thanks. Muraro, may you kindly share with us the presentation?
One moment.
My conversation will, while we are waiting for the presentation to be shared, my presentation, of course, is an overview of the work of the NA. So we won't be able to deal with every minute detail of what the NA is about, but it's going to deal with basically 10 areas. One, the constitutional framework, the functions of the NA, the powers, privileges, the business of the House, and the NA as a forum for debate, and the role of committees, and the lawmaking, oversight and accountability, public involvement. But I must emphasize, Professor, it's going to be briefly on those issues. So I've introduced myself, that is my name. We'll now move on to the next slide. I've just spoken to the contents of what I will be about, and I will move to the content of the presentation. The next slide. Yes, we will be aware that all of us that in 1994 we held the first democratic elections, and the Constitution was adopted in 1996, and we are a bicameral parliament. Before the adoption of the Constitution, you had the National Assembly and the Senate, and following the adoption of the Constitution, which created the National Council of Provinces, of course, we'll have a presentation on that. We are this bicameral parliament with these two houses. And of course, we would want to make the point that parliament, like society, is ever evolving in terms of how it conducts its business. Okay, the next slide. If I'm able to, you are able to give me sharing rights, I can move the slides from my side, but I don't mind, we can do it this way. Now, our primary mandate is derived from the Constitution. We are elected through a proportional electoral system from the voters' roll. The NA has 400 members. Currently, we have 14 political parties, and I must make this obvious point that the number of political parties vary from parliament to parliament. First parliament may have had a different number, second parliament. We call ourselves the sixth parliament because this would have been the sixth round of elections that we've had, national elections. So in this sixth parliament, we now have 14 parties, with the ANC being the largest party and Al Jamaa being the smallest party. The NA is elected to ensure government by the people under the Constitution. The statements that I'm going to make here, which are contained in the Constitution, are very loaded. It does this by choosing the president. So after every election, national election, we elect the president. Of course, as you will be aware, there have also been election of the president outside of the general election. In 2008, when we changed from President Mbeki to President Motlanthe, and again in 2018, it's interesting, in 2018, when we changed from President Zuma to President Ramaphosa, that was outside of the general elections. By providing a national forum for public consideration of issues where you have debates, different types of debates, obviously, things called snap debates. These are debates of national importance, and passing of legislation, and scrutinizing and overseeing executive action. We move to the next slide. Now, the National Assembly has the power to determine its own procedures. These are the rules of the NA. We develop the rules. They are not adopted at every start of a new parliament. They are only reviewed when there's a need to review them. So currently we are working on the basis of the rules that were reviewed in 2016 and agreed to in 2016. These rules continue to be adjusted, continue to be improved, and sometimes they are challenged. Those of you who would have watched the news or listened to the news would have seen that there is a court case at the Cape High Court where the rules in respect of the removal of office bearers and constitutional institutions are being challenged in court this week. The NA may summon any person to give evidence or produce documents. This is taken as a last resort when everything else has been attempted and failed. And the NA then gets to a point of summoning people to appear before it. That power is given in the Constitution. Members have freedom of speech and other privileges in the NA. That freedom of speech is limited only in terms of the rules. That is why you would have seen a member would rise on a point of order and the chair would say that is unparliamentary. You can't say that of a member. If you want to say that, you need to have a substantive motion. Basically, that is meant to regulate how members interact with each other and how they what is the word? How they exercise the right that they have of freedom of speech. You have freedom of speech, but you can't say anything you want to say, and there are ways of saying things. It does not mean when you believe that there is something that you have, a grievance you have against another member or some allegations that you have against another person, you cannot raise those, but there is a procedure for raising those allegations. And that is why the chair would say, please come up with a substantive motion. Why a substantive motion? To enable the House to deal with that issue once and for all. It takes a decision on it and moves on so that you don't have this dark cloud hanging above the head of a member and the House not dealing with it. So that's why you would then say, please don't just willy-nilly raise issues against other people. If you are serious about it, follow the procedure and the House will deal with the matter. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yes. And of course, before I deal with this issue, there's another issue that has been quite raised prominently, where things are said about members of the public in Parliament, and people often do not know what to do. There is provision for that in terms of the Privileges Act, that if things have been said about you, you're a member of the public, you are not a public representative, you can't answer for yourself in Parliament, you can apply for a right of reply. And that application will then serve before the Powers and Privileges Committee. And if it believes that there is a basis for you to be granted the right of reply, you will be granted that right, and your reply will be published in the publications of Parliament so that you are able to reply to things that have been said about you in Parliament. So it's not like people have no recourse at all. Now, sources of business, the Assembly is initiated, the business is initiated by different actors, the executive largely. So most legislation emanates from the executive, but there is provision for private members to initiate legislation and committees. Let me pause a little bit on private members. Before what we refer to as the Ambrosini judgment, there was a little bit of difficulty when it comes to members putting bills before Parliament. There was a committee that, in a sense, sifted those bills before they could be introduced. Then there was the Ambrosini judgment. Mr. Ambrosini was a member of Dr. Ambrosini was a member of the IFP. He challenged this procedure. He believed that every member ought to have the right to place a bill, as the executive does, before Parliament, and that bill must be considered, voted for or voted against. But you cannot have a sifting process for members of Parliament that you don't have for the executive. So he went to court.
Sorry, Dr. Mdimeli, may you kindly mute yourself? Thank you. Go on, Mr. Kasu.
May I proceed? Yes.
Yes, proceed.
Mr. Ambrosini went to court. The first attempt of his failed. He went to the appeal court. He went to various courts, he failed, but eventually, I think it was the Constitutional Court that said, yes, a member of Parliament, like the executive members, has a right to introduce a private member's bill, and that bill must be able to go through all the processes, go to the committee, go to the House, and have members of Parliament vote for or vote against the House. Since that judgment, there has been a number of private members' bills that have come through the system. Few of them, I think about 3 of them, have been passed since that by Parliament. So there is an opportunity for members of Parliament to present their own bills. If they feel that things are not adequately provided for in existing legislation, they can present their own bills, and those bills will be considered. Committees of Parliament can introduce bills. We know about the Section 25 committee. I want to give that practical example. That bill on the amendment of Section 25 is going to be a committee bill. It did not come from the executive. It did not come from a private member, but the committee, the ad hoc committee, has been given the power to introduce the bill to amend Section 25 of the Constitution. So that bill will be a committee bill. It's not been introduced. It's not been passed yet. It's in the system, but it will be a committee bill. So I've already said that they emanate from the executive, and I've dealt with that issue. I've dealt with the issue of members. And again, members can pose questions to the executive. So a number of things that are raised may not necessarily be dealt with in committees, but they will be dealt with in the House through a question system. There's a question. After every question, there are supplementary questions. So a question, members of the executive get a notice for that, but for supplementary questions, they don't get notice. So a supplementary question from the floor of the House, they are asked to those members of the executive, but the supplementary question must be related to the main question. Members make statements. Members table motions. Again, every political party in the NA has an opportunity to table a subject for discussion. We call those motions a subject for discussion, and there is a rotational system where each party is given an opportunity to sponsor their debate, and members sponsor, they debate those issues. Committees report on their activities, and those reports, of course, every report that is adopted by the House, it is communicated to the executive. Slide number 7. I've dealt with the NA being a mandate for debate, where you have free and open debate. Now, because we felt that the plenary, the main plenary, which is made up of all the parties, is really not able to deal with the amount of business that is before the House effectively and efficiently, the House then introduced a forum called mini plenaries. These are plenaries, but mini, of course, in a smaller scale, on a smaller scale, and they debate things. They don't take decisions. So a lot of issues that need debating, they are referred there. You can have these mini plenaries, for instance, 3 at a time. So, for instance, when we're passing the budget, debating the budget, you could have 9 mini plenaries in a day. So the first set of 3 mini plenaries would start at 10, the other set at 2, the other set at 4 o'clock, just to ensure that the House is able to do as much business as it possibly can. So you break up the House into small forums and debate things. Then those come to the House, where the House does not debate again. It basically takes decisions on each of them. You have committees, very important function. I mean, if you talk about the ESCOM inquiry, if you talk about the SABC inquiry, if you talk about whatever inquiry that you might have had, that inquiry would have been conducted by committees of Parliament. They have wide-ranging powers, and those powers include the power to conduct inquiries. The committees can summon anyone that they want to summon, well, of course, which is covered by the mandate of Parliament. So you have those committees. They are the substructures of the House. They don't exist on their own. Everything they do, it comes back to the House. Portfolio committees you have for each government department. You have portfolio committees in the NA, and they can determine their own programs and things that they wish to deal with. Slide number 9. Of course, we all know that COVID-19 has presented a different set of challenges, and the Assembly has been compelled to hold virtual hybrid meetings. That virtual/hybrid is deliberate, because since May last year, the NA, the big house, has been meeting in hybrid settings. So you have a set of members on the virtual platform and another set of members physically in the House. So we had to adopt rules for this purpose to be able to conduct these hybrid sittings. And of course, you also have the possibility of running the virtual sittings of the House. That has gone very well. And yeah, I think I've dealt with that. Of course, the virtual and hybrid sittings have got their own challenges. but we have been able to go and conduct business very well. The next slide. Lawmaking, I've dealt with that, so I'm not going to repeat it, except to say there are different types of bills. Section 74, which deals with amending the Constitution. 75, issues of national competence. 76, where provinces have a meaningful, not a meaningful, but substantial role to play. And 77, which deals with the money bills of Parliament. The next one. Go on. Oversight and accountability. We have a model on oversight and accountability that regulates how Parliament must conduct its oversight functions. We have dealt with the issue of electing the president, but the cabinet is both collectively and individually accountable to Parliament and must report on matters under its control. And Parliament must provide mechanisms to enable oversight and accountability in its activities. The next one. I've dealt with that. Public involvement. The Constitution enjoins Parliament to ensure public involvement in its proceedings. Participatory democracy is a fundamental element of our democracy. Proceedings must be open. Parliament disseminates information to constituencies. We have parliamentary democracy offices that assist in terms of disseminating information of Parliament. And we also have constituency offices. These are party political constituency offices, but they are all responsible for disseminating information of Parliament to ensure that people are able to access Parliament. The next one. Okay, we can go on. I'm also just mindful of the time. And Parliament also participates in international fora, like Pan-African Parliament, which is an example that will be very much fresh in your minds. Pan-African Parliament, there's a SADC Parliamentary Forum, and the Interparliamentary Parliament as well. We participate in those areas, in those forums. The next one. I won't spend much time here. Dr. Gabriel is best placed to deal with this matter, except to say that we continue to do research on a range of issues, how best to improve our business. The last thing I just want to say is that, and I omitted to include that slide, the NA has a publication. We call it Procedural Developments in the National Assembly. We record every event of significance annually. We produce it annually, and we tell stories. Whether you talk about the president resigning at 10 midnight and electing the next president the following day, we've documented those issues, every step of the way, what you've done in terms of doing that. Whether you're talking about secret ballot on a motion of no confidence in the president, we will have documented everything that happened. It's a public document. We make it available to libraries and whoever else is asking for it. So we have that publication. And of course, we have Guide to Procedure, which is currently being reviewed and being updated. Program Director, as I said, I'm mindful of time. That is what I really would like to say about the NA, but there's much more that we can talk about the NA, and I'm happy to engage at whatever level, whether here or another opportunity, on the interesting issues that happen within the NA. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Masibulele Qaso, for giving us an overview of how Parliament works. We will engage you shortly after Dr. Gabriel. Then now we're coming to the overview work of the National Council of Provinces and Potential Research Areas. Advocate Pindela, time is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me also take this opportunity to thank you for allowing me to present on the role of the National Council of Provinces. If you can indulge me just for a minute.
No problem, Advocate.
Thank you very much. I was sending my presentation to Dr. Baloy. I hope he has received it.
Dr. Baloy?
Dr. Baloy?
No, I'm checking. It has not yet come through.
Okay. Not yet.
Okay, yeah, it is. Okay, it's fine. I'm gonna forward it to Mr. Masisi, so that he can display. Thank you very much.
Okay. May I perhaps proceed in the meantime?
Yeah.
Yes, you can proceed.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. The National Council of Provinces, unlike the National Assembly, has been constituted or founded in terms of the Constitution, and in particular Section 42, subsection 4 of the Constitution, to represent the interests of the provinces in the national sphere of government, to participate in the national legislative process, and to provide national forum for consideration of issues affecting provinces. You'd realize that the emphasis is on the representation of provinces in the national sphere of government. And unlike the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces is not directly elected. It consists of 90 delegates, 10 from each province. So in other words, the province of Limpopo will have 10 representatives, province of Mpumalanga will have 10 representatives, and so on and so on. And that's how we come to the number 90. Out of these 90 delegates, we have 54 that are permanent delegates. The permanent delegates are those who are permanently here in Cape Town. You can refer to them as permanent members of the National Council of Provinces. And they are here on a day-to-day basis, and they deal with the business of the National Council of Provinces on a day-to-day basis. Then we have 36 delegates that we refer to as special delegates. These 36 special delegates are also members of the provincial legislatures. And that's the unique nature of the National Council of Provinces. It is perhaps the only house that can have a member who belongs to two houses at the same time. These 36 special delegates are members of provincial legislatures, and they include the Premier. So on a daily basis, on a permanent basis, they are with their provincial legislatures. From time to time, they are invited to the National Council of Provinces. If, for instance, we are debating matters relating to, let's say, health, for instance, we would invite all MECs for health or the chairpersons of portfolio committees in the provincial legislatures to participate in the debate. You will never see such happening in the National Assembly. The National Assembly has its own 400 members who are permanently there, and the National Assembly never invites any MECs to come and participate in the debate in the House. So if you see, for instance, members of provincial legislatures, the MECs and so on, participating in a sitting, which is together with the National Assembly, you should know that it's a joint sitting. But in the ordinary course of events, they only participate in the debates in the National Council of Provinces. They also attend meetings of the committees of the National Council of Provinces, and they participate in the processes and proceedings of the meetings of the committees of the National Council of Provinces. These delegates, 90 of them, are nominated by parties represented in the provincial legislatures in proportion of their representation. So it depends on how many seats a particular party has in a provincial legislature, and that party would then be entitled to a proportion of special delegates or permanent delegates in proportion of the votes that it had garnered during the elections. For instance, if you have, and which is the national picture, you have the National Council, the African National Congress as the majority party. So you would find that the majority of permanent delegates are members of the African National Congress, followed by the party that garnered the second highest number of votes. There is a formula that we use to determine whether a party qualifies for special delegates or for permanent delegates. There are some parties that qualify for special delegates only, and there are parties that qualify for both special delegates and permanent delegates, depending, of course, on the number of seats that a party holds in a particular legislature. As I've indicated, these delegates are appointed by the provincial legislatures. So after the elections, once the provincial legislatures have been constituted, at their first sitting, the provincial legislatures must designate the delegates to the National Council of Provinces. And those then become members of the National Council of Provinces. And that is why the term of office of the delegates of the National Council of Provinces ends shortly before the beginning or the first sitting of a provincial legislature. So the National Council of Provinces has, one may say, has some kind of a continuous existence. It never ceases to exist, be it that there are elections at a given time. And in addition to that, which is also another distinctive nature of the National Council of Provinces, we have 10 representatives of organized local government who may participate in the proceedings and processes of the National Council of Provinces when it is necessary to do so. But the distinguishing factor is that they are not members of the National Council of Provinces, and they are therefore not entitled to vote. So they may participate in committee meetings, they may participate in the debates, they might ask questions, but they may not vote because they are not members of the National Council of Provinces. So all in all, at any given time, we have 100 members in the National Council of Provinces, 90 delegates, and 10 representatives of organized local government. The National Council of Provinces, like the National Assembly, has the power to consider laws, to pass legislation, to amend bills affecting provinces, to propose amendments to bills not affecting provinces. Let me just explain the difference between the two. The bills affecting provinces are referred to as bills, as Section 76 bills. And these are bills which are dealt with in terms of Section 76, or the procedure outlined in Section 76 of the Constitution. These are bills which affect provinces. And in most instances, these are bills that fall within the functional area of concurrent competence. For instance, matters relating to health, matters relating to social services, matters relating to the environment, matters relating to education, and so on and so on. So these are bills which affect provinces, and therefore the provinces must express their views insofar as these bills are concerned in the national sphere of government, and they do so through the National Council of Provinces. And that is why the National Council of Provinces is set to represent the interest of provinces in the national sphere of government. Insofar as these bills are concerned, in order to vote in the National Council of Provinces, the provincial delegation must get a mandate by the province. So when there's a bill affecting provinces, that bill is referred to the provincial legislature. The provincial legislature participates in the lawmaking process in the national sphere of government. Then it says to its delegation, vote in favor of this bill, or vote against this bill, or abstain from voting on this bill. So insofar as those bills are concerned, the National Council of Provinces may amend those bills. They are usually introduced in the National Assembly. The National Assembly then refers those bills to the National Council of Provinces, and we deal with them in terms of the mandates from the provincial legislatures or from the provinces. So a delegate may not go against a mandate issued by a provincial legislature. So you'd realize that insofar as these bills are concerned, the fact that you belong to a particular party does not enter any reckoning. So it's immaterial whether your party agrees with the bill or it does not agree with the bill. The mandate comes from the provincial legislature. It goes to the whole delegation. It does not go to an individual. So the whole delegation carries the mandate of the province and therefore votes in terms, irrespective of a party political line, votes alongside or in accordance with that particular mandate. And these are the bills that the National Council of Provinces, if the National Assembly send them to us or to the National Council of Provinces, National Council of Provinces may amend those bills and send them back to the National Assembly for the National Assembly to consider the amendments or the amendments as effected by the National Council of Provinces. And the National Assembly may agree with the amendments, may not agree with the amended bill. If the National Assembly agrees with the amended bill, then it passes it and then it goes to the President for assent and signature. In the event that the National Assembly does not agree with the amended bill, then we form what we refer to as the Mediation Committee. The Mediation Committee is a committee that is formed by the two houses, 9 members from each house, and that Mediation Committee may agree on the bill as passed by the National Council of Provinces or a bill as passed by the National Assembly, or may come up with a completely new bill. So that's the power of the National Council of Provinces and the provinces in the lawmaking process in the national sphere of government. But insofar as bills not affecting provinces are concerned, and those are referred to as Section 75 bills, the National Council of Provinces may propose amendments. So in other words, if the National Assembly has passed a bill and refers it to the National Council of Provinces, and these bills can only be introduced in the National Assembly, if the National Assembly passes the bill and refers it to the National Council of Provinces, and the National Council of Provinces has proposals to make insofar as amendments are concerned, we do not amend that bill. When we send it back to the National Assembly, we send it accompanied by the proposed amendments from the National Council of Provinces. And the National Assembly may consider those amendments and still pass the bill without amendments, or if it doesn't pass the bill without amendments, then that bill may lapse. So insofar as the bills not affecting provinces are concerned, the National Council of Provinces has very limited role to play. Although a bill will never become a law unless it has been passed by the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly. I'm sure those who watched the news this morning and sometime last week, you have heard reports that Parliament has passed the appropriation bill and special appropriation bill. Parliament has not passed the special appropriation bill and the appropriation bill. It is the National Assembly that has passed those bills. Until such time that the National Council of Provinces has considered and passed those bills, we cannot say that Parliament has passed those bills. It will only be said that Parliament has passed the bills until such time that the National Council of Provinces has also passed the bills. So no law or no bill can become an act unless it has been passed by both houses. Then the National Council of Provinces also has the power to reject any legislation, or it may initiate legislation falling within the functional area of concurrent competence. The concurrent competences are matters relating to, for instance, education. You know that we have both higher education and basic education. We have departments of basic education in the provinces. We do have the departments of health in provinces. We do have the departments that deal with environment and land matters in the provinces. We do not have in the provinces, for instance, the Department of Police. We do not have the Department of Mineral Resources. We do not have the Department of Defense, and this and so on and so on. So these are matters that would fall within Schedule 5 of the Constitution. These are matters which would fall within the national competence. For instance, there are matters which may fall within outside the concurrent competence, but which may necessarily affect provinces. Sometimes we look at matters when we are classifying the bills, and if you just look at the title of a bill, you may think that it does not affect provinces. But if you go into the details of the bill, even if it talks about defense, for instance, you may realize that there are other matters that affect provinces, and that bill must be classified as a bill affecting provinces. So that would be how the bills may be classified. Of particular importance is that, like the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces may not initiate money bills. It's only the Minister of Finance who may initiate money bills, and that is in terms of Section 68 of the Constitution. The other distinctive area that the National Council of Provinces has a role to play in would be the area of cooperative government and intergovernmental relations provided for in Chapter 3 of the Constitution. Insofar as cooperative government and intergovernmental relations are concerned, the National Council of Provinces is required to oversee cooperation between the three spheres of government, which are interrelated, interdependent, and distinctive. They are interrelated because they depend on each other and they relate to each other. They are interdependent in the sense that if a provincial government is unable to carry out its own constitutional obligations, the national sphere of government must assist that sphere of government, that provincial sphere of government, to carry out its own constitutional obligations. And it goes down to the local sphere of government. If the local sphere of government is unable to carry out its constitutional obligations, the provincial sphere must assist. If the provincial sphere cannot assist, then the national sphere may assist. You would remember that there was what was referred to as an intervention in Limpopo, where about 5 or so departments were taken over by, the functions were taken over by national government, and currently the same thing is happening in Northwest, and that is where we refer to that situation as an intervention. But cooperation goes to the fact that the three spheres must function together, must work together as one, and they must ensure that they assist each other in carrying out the constitutional obligations. But these three spheres are also distinctive in the sense that each one, if one looks at the Constitution, Schedules 4 and 5 of the Constitution, each one has its own distinctive function to carry out. There are, of course, functional areas of concurrent competence, but there are roles or there are functions that only the local sphere of government can legislate on, for instance. Or there are functions which only the provincial sphere of government can legislate on. Or there are functions on which the national sphere of government can legislate on. And insofar as those are concerned, they are distinct in that sense, because the national sphere, for instance, cannot legislate on, let's say, on the trading hours of bottle stores and this and so on and so on. The national sphere of government, for instance, cannot legislate on matters relating to licensing of motor vehicles and this and so on and so on. So those are distinct functions that a sphere of government can legislate on. And in addition to that, if there is an intervention, the National Council of Provinces must ensure that that intervention is within constitutional permissible constraints. In other words, one sphere should not take over the functions of another outside the constraints of the Constitution. And those constraints of the are referred to in Section 100 and Section 139 of the Constitution. Section 100 will deal with the intervention by national sphere in the provincial sphere, and 139 will deal with the intervention in the local sphere of government. So the National Council of Provinces is required to strike that balance to make sure that if there is an intervention, the intervention complies with all the constitutional requirements insofar as an intervention is concerned. I know that in most instances, if not in all, the two are used, cooperative government and intergovernmental relations are used interchangeably. But the fact that the drafters of the Constitution deemed it fit to use the two concepts, it means that the two concepts are distinct. It means that they are different. Otherwise, the drafters of the Constitution could have used one concept. And there is also a conjunction there. It says cooperative government and intergovernmental relations. So whereas cooperative government refers to the functioning of the three spheres of government together, intergovernmental relations would refer to the power relations between the three spheres of government, and to ensure that the National Council of Provinces must ensure that that balance is always maintained between the three spheres of government. I have dealt with the legislative process already. I'm not going to go into details insofar as that is concerned. I will deal with the decision-making process in the National Council of Provinces. I have touched on it very briefly. Insofar as decisions on bills affecting provinces are concerned, each provincial delegation has one vote, not provincial delegate. Each provincial delegation has one vote. So if there's a matter before the National Council of Provinces and it deals with a bill, for instance, affecting provinces, effectively we will have 9 votes. We will not have 90 votes. We will have 9 votes from each provincial delegation. And for a vote to carry the day, at least 5 provinces must vote in favor of that bill. And that is in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. If you are dealing with a bill that amends a constitution, dealt with in terms of Section 74 of the Constitution, for a bill to carry the day, the voting is also along the provincial lines. each delegation has got 1 vote. So for a bill amending the constitution to carry the day, at least 6 provinces must vote in favor of that bill. If you are dealing with what is referred to as money bills, the appropriation bill, for instance, each delegate has 1 vote. Or if you are dealing with bills not affecting provinces in terms of Section 75, each delegate has got 1 vote. So effectively, if we are voting and we have a full house, we will have 90 votes for bills not affecting provinces or for money bills. Whereas if it's bills affecting provinces and bills amending the constitution, we will effectively have 9 votes from 9 provincial delegations. The reasoning behind that, I would venture to say that what is presented insofar as bills affecting provinces are concerned is not an individual or a party political vote, but is a vote of a province. And that is why each delegation has got 1 vote. Whereas on bills not affecting provinces, on money bills, what is expressed, the expression is that of it may be an individual expression, it may be a party political line expression. That should take me to the end of my presentation. I hope that I have given you the areas that you will be able to look at and say, yes, we can go into this area and research and look at how other parliaments in the world deal with these matters. We can go into this area and say there are parliaments that are bicameral, like the South African parliament, like the Parliament of Kenya, for instance, has got 2 houses. Is this how they are also dealing with the bills? Is this how they take decisions in the 2 houses? The Parliament of Namibia, for instance, has got 2 houses. Although they borrowed heavily from us, both Kenya and Namibia borrowed heavily from South Africa. One can go into that and have a comparative analysis of whether this is how the decisions are taken in the two houses. So Rolebua Kamanda.
Really, thank you very much, Advocate Pitela, for this presentation. We will engage you after Dr. Gabriel's presentation on the Knowledge and Information Services. Dr. Gabriel, time is yours.
Thank you, Program Facilitator, Professor Mashao, and good morning, Secretaries, Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Nechandama, Dr. Baloy, colleagues, students. Prof. Mashao, I will try to share my own slides and hope that we don't have any problems. Okay, I hope that you can see them.
Very clear.
All right. So good morning again, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Indeed, it is something that we regard very highly, to be able to engage with colleagues and scholars and fellow researchers outside Parliament particularly. Prof, I am aware that the real value of these types of engagements is in the interaction and the discussion.
Oh, we can put it here. Yeah.
So I will be quite brief, but give you some content that we can work with and have an organic discussion with the So very quickly, my presentation will give you a high-level overview of the Knowledge and Information Services Division in Parliament. Sorry, Prof.
Dr. Gabriel, can you mute yourself, and then we shall just want to check where the sound comes from. Mute yourself, Dr. Gabriel. Okay.
Can you check the mic of Atlas Maidula?
Okay. Dr. Gabriel, try to go on. Just proceed. Unmute yourself.
All right. Do we still have background noise?
I think there's noise behind.
May well be coming from. Okay, may I proceed?
Yeah, we can proceed. You can proceed.
Okay, so as I was saying, I will give you a quick high-level overview of the Knowledge and Information Services Division in Parliament. We'll look a little bit at the 6th Parliament strategy map. I will touch on the knowledge management strategy that comes from that, and then we'll delve into some of the nuts and bolts of research, including strategic collaborations, and then some focus on the research unit, particularly giving some of the key contacts and how the unit is structured. So on the broad strokes, the Knowledge and Information Services Division is a support division in Parliament, one of many. We're a relatively large division, approximately 245 staff at the moment. Not all of them are researchers, so I'll go into some of the details. So the division covers the documentation section of Parliament, the library and information section, language services, and research services. So if we look into each of those, we look at our outputs, information and analysis, professional multilingual communication services, and then knowledge creation and organization. And as I said, we are a support service to Parliament, so we do not exist in and of our own right. So the research unit, and when we get to the details, you'll see this, is not an independent research institution or institute like other research bodies like. In terms of information analysis provision, our main objective is to support and enhance the work of committees and the plenaries or houses of Parliament, and particularly as it relates to the core business areas of oversight, lawmaking, and very importantly, public participation. So we seek to strengthen, as I say, oversight and accountability. Colleagues would be aware, particularly in the recent engagements at the Zondo Commission, for example, where the work of parliamentarians in terms of oversight and accountability has come under sharp focus. And we have been ourselves looking at this area of work and how it can be improved from the very beginning of our democratic parliament. And there have been various developments in that area. Of course, research is one of those critical inputs into the developments that happen around strengthening oversight and accountability. The language services section primarily deals with multilingualism in Parliament. As you all are aware, we have 11 official languages plus South African Sign Language. And really it is to facilitate the engagement amongst members of Parliament in the debates, in the deliberations in committees, but also to facilitate public participation. So we have language practitioners who are professional staff that provide a translations and an interpreting service, as well as a reporting service. Plenaries, and they work primarily with the plenary sessions of the National Assembly and the National Council, but also with committees when committees engage with communities on various aspects, including bills before committees, as well as oversight investigations. Our knowledge creation and organization component of the division ties in with what Professor Netandama was mentioning earlier around knowledge co-production, knowledge sharing, and then of course the organization and use of knowledge within Parliament and beyond. To get into a little bit more of the details, as I said, the division is headed by myself currently. We have the language services section, which is relatively large. We have over 100 staff in that section. Documentation services deals with electronic document management and the tablings in Parliament. So we have the clerk of papers. It's an office which deals with all of the inputs, formal inputs into Parliament, either in the National Assembly or the National Council of Provinces, that must be tabled in Parliament. And that section handles all of that and publishes what has been tabled from one day to the next. The research unit, as I said, we'll go into some detail on research in this presentation, and then the Parliamentary Information Centre, which is our Library of Parliament, which works very closely with the research unit. Some of the key contacts, language services is currently managed by an acting section manager, Ms. Yufrat Mgadi, and it has the reporting unit, translations unit, interpreting unit. I won't go into all of the detail there, but just to highlight the reporting unit, if colleagues might have read some of the formal proceedings of the houses, we refer to the Hansard report. And this unit deals with ensuring that we have the Hansard, which is the verbatim report of the proceedings from the houses. These are now published electronically on Parliament's website, so they have broad public access. Translations, we do translations in all official languages, and then we all official South African languages. And then we outsource some of the other languages when members of Parliament engage at forums such as the SADC Parliamentary Forum or the Inter-Parliamentary Union, where documents are sometimes required to be in French or any other of the working languages of those forums. The interpreting unit, again, we have interpreters for all 11 official languages plus South African Sign Language. And as I said, we provide interpreting services to the Houses of Parliament, but also to committees as deemed appropriate and as we can manage within our available resources. Documentation services, I'm not going to go into the details of what they do, I've already covered that, but just to give you some key contacts, it's headed by Mr. Peter Lebeko, he's the section manager. We have documentation and technical services, which also has a fully functional in-house printing unit. The parliamentary papers, as I mentioned, the clerk of papers sits there, and then a telephone management office as well. Parliament, again, we have a vacancy at the level of the chief librarian, so currently headed by an acting chief librarian, Mr. Tony Chauke. And here, this is a fully functional library. The Library of Parliament is a specialist library, so we don't function like a normal public library or like an academic library, but our focus is on building content that's relevant to the work of members of Parliament, as well as researchers and other staff interested. Our clients stretch beyond the walls of the precincts of Parliament So we do provide a library service to researchers from all over the world. We are fortunate in that we are what is called a legal deposit library. So we receive copies of all South African publications. Obviously, we read through those to see what are relevant for Parliament and our collection. We then also have processing and indexing unit, acquisitions, and rare and historical materials, some of which only reside within the Library of Parliament and not elsewhere in the country. Get then into what is probably more of your interest today is research services. Our chief researcher currently is Dr. Gilbert Vesso. The research unit has currently about 42 researchers. We have 10 administrative assistants that assist 7 clusters. And those 7 clusters are each headed by a senior researcher. And then we have the researchers who are subject specialists. Our researchers are recruited in terms of our entry-level requirement with a minimum of an honors level degree and at least 3 years of applied research experience. Most of our staff currently have master's degrees, and beyond many of them have PhD. So it is a professional service, and on a very high level, the main thrust of the research unit, as I said, it is supportive. It is a support service to the members of Parliament. We don't exist in and of our own. We provide objective, non-partisan research and analysis that cover all of the areas of the work of members of Parliament, all of the portfolios of government, all of the matters of interest to members of Parliament, and indeed not just the committees, but also individual members. So we are required to provide a service to all 490 MPs in a non-partisan, objective manner. So that is really the mandate of the unit. Obviously, we look at the capacity that we have within and what are the key issues that members are dealing with at any point in time. We are moving towards wanting to be more proactive in the services that we provide and not being a very reactive service. I think you have a very distinct advantage of Dr. Baloy having hands-on experience in the research unit and its working, so you will have a fair understanding of the demands in terms of parliamentary research, how that differs from other research outside of Parliament. Just to touch quickly on where this fits into the strategy map of the 6th Parliament. The 6th Parliament Strategic Plan is an outcomes-based plan whose 2 key outcomes are the 2 interrelated and codependent socioeconomic outcome indicators of poverty reduction and inequality, reducing inequality. So the entire strategy is geared towards that long-term impact and outcome. We are at input at the lower end of the strategy map. And research, obviously, as I said, links to all of the activities of members of Parliament. You can see in the blue block here. But also, we focus on enhancing member capacity and deepening insights. And deepening insights relates specifically to some of your areas of interest in terms of informed decision making. And how does research underpin the kinds of laws that members pass and the kinds of reports that members of committees adopt to be submitted to the houses, and the kinds of interactions and debates and deliberations that members have, both at committee level but also in the plenary assemblies. From that strategy map, which is based obviously on the policy priorities of Parliament, there is a set of strategies that would move us forward in terms of the execution of the strategic plan. And in that, what is relevant particularly to our division is the knowledge management strategy. Now, this does not imply that these strategies are standalone activities. So the knowledge management strategy is very closely aligned to an oversight plan, which is a multi-year plan, a public participation strategy, obviously our digital technology strategy, and a human capital strategy that looks at the kinds of skills and expertise that we require to do the work that we need or to implement the strategic plan, and also what capacity building we need to embark on, both for our officials but also for members of Parliament. It is underpinned by a 3-year research plan, which is supported also by a 3-year library and information plan. And both of these reside within the Knowledge and Information Services Division. So to tell you a little bit on the thinking around the multi-year research plan, I said earlier that we are moving towards wanting to be more proactive in terms of the research that we produce, and also in this way give researchers the latitude of time to apply their knowledge and expertise, to design and devise research projects that will have greater utility than the quick turnaround, quick briefs that are the more kind of reactive service. The two are not mutually exclusive, but we do feel that if we do become more proactive in the kind of research that we're able to do, we can do more in-depth research, we can have more collaborative research projects, both within Parliament but also beyond, and therefore have richer, more valuable products that will have greater utility for the core business of members of Parliament. The key things that inform the multi-year research plan is the Parliamentary Program in the first instance. The Parliamentary Program, which programming committees in both the Council and the Assembly look at every week, gives us a very fair indication of what each of the houses is planning to do for a considerable amount of time. The program framework gives us a high-level idea of the key areas of focus of the business of the houses over at least 2 terms of the year, but certainly also for the entire year. So each year we can get a high-level overview of where the houses are planning to devote their resources. And then week on week, the details of that program are examined and agreed upon in the programming committees, as I said. Committee plans and what we refer to as the Z list also give very detailed accounts of what each committee in the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly has planned or has on its agenda for a particular week. And again, those are reviewed and revised continuously. And as we keep an eye on the areas of focus of the committees, it also informs the kind of research that we should be doing. The National Council of Provinces particularly starts off each year with committees of the Council embarking on committee strategic planning. These are multi-year plans, but they also have annual performance plans for each committee as well. A similar process happens in the National Assembly, but in a slightly less structured way currently. And the importance of this is that committees use these plans to budget the kind of financial resources that they would require for a particular year. We also have the sectoral parliaments, in which members of parliament engage with youth, with women, with persons with disabilities, with children. And there are various matters that are discussed at those sectoral parliaments, and reports are produced out of which research can emerge. As I mentioned earlier, public participation is one of the key constitutional mandates of Parliament. The Taking Parliament to the People program, provincial weeks and local government weeks of the National Council of Provinces give us very valuable data and insights into what are the important matters. Important matters or contentious matters in communities. And then also the oversight reports of committees and they embark on oversight or engagement on bills before committees. There are also reports from Chapter 9 institutions and other statutory bodies, such as the Auditor General, for example, and colleagues might be aware that the Auditor General's reports now do not only look at financial performance, but also report on service delivery performance. So again, that gives us very valuable data at the national, provincial, and local scales of government, and all state organs that appropriate public funds. So again, we look at those to design and develop research that would be of relevance to members and committees of Parliament. And then, as Mr. Klassen had mentioned earlier, there are matters of public importance and public interest, which are the topics of debate in the Houses, and also inform the kinds of questions that members of Parliament will pose either to the President or the Deputy President, or to ministers of various departments. We are very much in favor of strategic collaborations, and this is one of our strategies to enhance the capacity within Parliament, but particularly within research. Our concept here is that we enter into memoranda of understanding that are premised on mutually beneficial relationships, obviously data sharing and analytical reports, but also collaborative processes, including the knowledge sharing initiatives such as seminars, webinars of this nature, and more topical discussions that are relevant to the work of members of Parliament. We have entered into some MOUs already, and others are at quite an advanced stage of development. And I have given a list of some of the organizations that we have engaged with thus far. Our initial focus was on statutory organizations. I must be forthright in saying that we do not, given the current state of the fiscus in the country, we do not have a dedicated budget for commissioned research. So these MOUs are therefore very important for us to be able to tap into and share the knowledge that exists outside of Parliament as well. The next few slides, Program Facilitator, give you some detail of the research unit, and I put in some bases to
Dr. Gabriel?
Yes,
Dr. Gabriel, you can wind up due to time.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just saying I'm not going to go into all of the next few slides. It just gives you an indication of the various clusters within research and who are the people that are in those clusters and the kinds of areas of research work or subjects that they will cover. Thank you, Program Facilitator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gabriel, for this presentation. Now we I would like to give opportunity colleagues to ask questions on overview of the work of the National Assembly, overview work of the National Council of Provinces, and also an overview of the knowledge and information services that Parliament gives to people of South Africa. Colleagues, I will take 5 questions first, and then we'll see as time goes by or whether we will have to take more questions. Colleagues, time is yours. Prof. Mwafu, you can unmute yourself and ask questions. Prof.
Yes, thank you, Prof. My question goes to Mr. Pendala. Yes, thank you, Mr. Pendala, for your presentation. I enjoyed the aspects that talks on the NCOP. Yes, please, I want to find out from you. The provincial legislature, does it have power to make laws for the province? If the answer is yes, do you think that the NCOP is not indispensable in the democratic legislative process in South Africa? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mwafu. Any other question? If there's no question, Prof. Neshandama?
Thank you,
Time is
Chair.
yours.
Thank you, Chair. My question is directed to Dr. Gabriel. I'm happy he indicated that there is an intention to be proactive. However, I'm just wondering if he cannot also tease out some of the examples of which areas, in his view, given the experience he has, needs further probing, deepening of understanding, and so forth. Just a quick example of those in his view. Thanks.
Thank you, Prof. Neshandama. Dr. Kahiru?
Oh, hello.
Dr. Kahiru, go on.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm just struggling with the technology. My question is, thank you for this forum and for the discussion, but my question is to Mr. Masibulere. It's, as a general member of the public, you mentioned private members matters can be discussed in Parliament. I wanted to know whether the private members meant the parliamentarians as private or whether it's from the members of public. That's what I wanted just to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kahiru. Douglas Mayelula?
Thank you, Chair. My question goes to the first speaker. I just wanted him to share with us what would be the implications of the incorrect tagging of a bill as a Section 75 or a Section 76. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Mayelula. The last question. If there is no more question, I'll give this opportunity to Advocate Pindela. Advocate Pindela. You can respond to the first question.
Okay. Sorry, Prof. I could not get the last question.
Or the first, okay. It's the first question which talks about the powers of province, whether provinces have. Yes, you take it on. Okay. Oh, before you take it on, let me give chance to Dr. Chari, Professor Chari.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'd like to thank our presenters for very enlightening presentations. I've got a few questions to each one of them. My first question goes to Advocate Kaso. He spoke about privileges of parliamentarians. I would like to find out whether he can shed more light on the immunities that are afforded members of parliament. I'm thinking of, for example, can a member of parliament repeat certain allegations that are made to a member of the public? Can they repeat those claims or those allegations outside parliament when parliament is not sitting, for example, at a rally in Soweto or somewhere there? Would they still be protected? Would they still be immune? And the second one goes to Advocate Pindile. He talked about joint sittings. I would like to find out under what circumstances do we have a joint sitting, or what kind of business warrants joint sittings? And then lastly, to Dr. Gabriel, the issue of languages. There are 11 official languages, and we understand that all of them have got, they are supposed to enjoy parity and equality. To what extent does this really, or does this actually happen? For example, are all parliament documents translated into 11 official languages? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Prof. I'll give this opportunity to Advocate Pindle for answering two questions on powers of the provinces to come up with legislation and joint sittings.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me just take the last one first. The business that warrant joint sittings. The Constitution authorizes the two houses to design joint rules to regulate joint business. So in addition to the rules of the National Council of Provinces, which are applicable only to the National Council of Provinces, and the rules of the National Assembly, which are applicable only to the National Assembly, we also have the joint rules. The joint rules would deal with joint business. For instance, if we have a joint committee that is formed by members of the National Assembly and members of the National Council of Provinces, the processes and proceedings of that committee will be governed by the joint rules applicable to joint committees. If we have, for instance, we have the Joint Rules Committee. The Joint Rules Committee deals with the rules, with the joint rules. Those would be the rules that govern the business of the two houses when they are sitting together. We have the Joint Program Committee. That Joint Program Committee deals with a combined program of the two houses. Then the framework of parliamentary program is dealt with in terms of the joint rules by the Joint Program Committee. And individual houses also have their own program committees. But a classical example of a joint business would be the State of the Nation address, where the two houses sit together to listen to the President's State of the Nation address, as well as to debate the President's State of the Nation address. Those proceedings are governed not by the rules of the National Council of Provinces, not by the rules of the National Assembly, but by the joint rules. So you've got three pairs of rules. Rules of the National Assembly, rules of the National Council of Provinces, and the joint rules. If we have also common debates, for instance, the President convened a joint sitting, for instance, to debate gender-based violence. And that was the sitting of the two houses. That was a joint business, which was dealt with in terms of the joint rules. I can give more examples, but those are just a few examples where the joint rules would be applicable, where we would have a joint business. Then the question whether the provincial legislatures do have the power to make laws. Indeed, they do have the powers to make laws. And if one looks at Schedule 5 of the Constitution, Schedule 5 of the Constitution is functional areas of exclusive provincial legislative competence. So those are the matters that only the provinces or the provincial legislatures may legislate on, exclusively on those matters. Abattoirs, ambulance services, archives other than national archives, libraries other than national libraries, provincial cultural matters, and so on and so on. So those are the matters that the provincial legislatures may legislate on, and only the provincial legislatures may legislate on those matters. So national government may come up with a framework, but may not legislate on those matters because those are matters of exclusive provincial legislative competence. Maybe the question is whether the provincial legislatures are doing that effectively. Maybe that's the question. Maybe that is one what should then be looked into. That can be pursued, whether provincial legislatures are doing that effectively, how many laws since their establishment have they passed, and in which areas were those laws meant to deliver services to the masses of the people in those provinces, and so on and so on. Maybe that's the question that must be pursued. But whether they have legislative powers or not, they do have the legislative powers. And the second question was whether the National Council of Provinces is indispensable or not, given that the provincial legislatures do have the powers to make laws. If one looks at what the National Council of Provinces is required to do, it is required to enable the provinces to participate in the lawmaking processes in areas in which they would otherwise not be competent to legislate on. So that is where the National Council of Provinces ensures that the provincial interests are taken into consideration in the legislative sphere of government. And I think that's the operative words, to ensure that the voices of provinces are heard in the national sphere of government on matters that provincial legislatures may otherwise not be competent to legislate on. And that is why when the bill affecting provinces is introduced in the National Assembly and it comes to the National Council of Provinces, the National Council of Provinces takes that bill and goes to the provincial legislatures and say, here is a bill and this bill affects you. Can we hear what your voices are, so that we can then make sure that we represent your voices in the national sphere of government. And that is how the provinces will then participate in the national sphere of government. And that's the relevance of the National Council of Provinces in that sphere, in that area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Advocate. Dr. Gabriel, 2 questions.
Program Facilitator, thank you. I'll take Professor Nechandama's question first. Just to say at the outset that the research unit is currently finalizing the 3-year research plan, so it will be a little bit preemptive for me to give any level of detail. And I do want to refer you probably Dr. Baloy, to engage with the chief researcher to look at which subjects or projects would be appropriate for collaboration. But just to say, when one looks at the areas of poverty and inequality, those social determinants of poverty and inequality make for very interesting research projects because of the interdependent nature and interrelatedness of all of those social and economic determinants. Another area that we have been looking at is the whole notion of social cohesion and nation building in South Africa, which is still lagging behind in terms of what the expectations were this far into our democracy, and how that fits into the national development strategy, as well as the regional, continental, and global development instruments, such as the SDGs. So there's a whole host of over 500 indicators that we need to track as an institution. And how do we do that in any organized and usable way? If we look at some of the recent developments, Prof, they have provided some opportunities for some communities and some levels in our society, but have worsened inequality for others. Education is a prime example. And if we accept that quality education is the great equalizer for future generations, to interrupt the cycles of generational poverty, then what does it mean in this new world of work, the new paradigm in terms of how we're engaging in the education sector, how we are teaching, how we're learning? Is it going to worsen poverty and inequality given the socioeconomic conditions in countries such as ours? I hope that suffices, but I do reiterate, please engage with the chief researcher on appropriate collaborations in terms of the research plan. Prof. Chari, languages is a challenge for Parliament. To answer your question very specifically, no, we do not translate all of the documents into all 11 official languages. There are some parliamentary papers that we translate. We certainly translate the calls or advertisement for public input that go into the public media, and then also public submissions. So public submissions can be received by Parliament in any of the official languages. Our staff then translate them so that members can engage with those submissions. And then we translate memoranda to bills for committees to engage communities so that it enhances the community involvement in legislation as well. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Doc. Mr. Klaso?
Thank you so much, Prof. Yeah, to Dr. Kayeru, starting with the issue of private members matters. Now, in terms of our rules, a private member means any member other than a minister, a deputy minister, the speaker, or the deputy speaker. So when we speak of private members, we're speaking of members of Parliament who are not in this category or the categories that I've just mentioned now. Obviously, members do not represent themselves. They represent their constituencies. So when a member puts forward a piece of law, a bill, to be processed within Parliament, the understanding always is that they are representing the interest of the people that elected them. So members of the public would basically be speaking through their public representatives in Parliament. But in terms of the formal processes, it would be a member of Parliament who tables that legislation for processing by Parliament. Then you asked a question about incorrect tagging of a law. Obviously, in the ordinary course of events, if a bill went through the whole process and was supposed to be tagged in a particular way, it could be regarded as unconstitutional. I'm looking for a better word, as unconstitutional. However, if it is established in the process that a wrong taking was done, it can still be corrected. Again, it also depends on the type of a bill, whether it's a 75 or 76. For 75, if a 75 is tagged as a 76, it is not difficult to cure that, but it will be a problem, for instance, if a section 70, let's say a section 74 is tagged differently, because section 74 is the one that seeks to amend the constitution, because there are particular time frames that are applicable to section 74 bills. But the constitutionality of the bill would obviously be a challenge in that regard, because where, for instance, it would have needed to go through certain public engagement processes, because it's taxed differently, it might not go through that, and that would be a problem. Now, Dr. Chari has asked about the issue of immunities of members. I thought I should just read what the Constitution says and maybe explain it. It says, section 58 of the Constitution says, Cabinet members, deputy ministers, members of the NA have freedom of speech in the assembly and in its committees, subject to its rules and orders, are not liable to civil or criminal proceedings, arrest or imprisonment or damages. Yes, and then the Privileges Act would extend it and say have immunities and privileges in the proceedings of Parliament. So that means that, for instance, Parliament can hold its meeting or a committee in a place away from Parliament, but that will still be covered in terms of the proceedings of Parliament. So, but they cannot say those things outside of the proceedings or meetings of the House or committees and still invoke the protection that is found in section 58. So they would be liable there for claims if they did that. But I do want to emphasize this point, because people are not, we've established that they are not always aware. Where a member has said things that a member of the public feels aggrieved by, there is recourse. If you feel that these things are incorrect, you can write to Parliament, and Parliament would obviously consider your submission. And if there are grounds to process your submission, it would then go through a committee and then be published. That is your right of reply. It's not like you have no recourse at all when members say things about you as a member of the public. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tasso. Now, due to time again, I will now call upon Prof. Bantwini, Executive Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Social Sciences and Education, to give a vote of thanks. Prof. Bantwini, time is yours.
Thank you, Program Director, Professor Mashau. All protocol observed. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for affording me this time to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of the Faculty of Humanities, Social Sciences and Education, and the University of Venda community, firstly, I wish to express our wholehearted gratitude to our Vice Chancellor and Principal, Dr. Ntambeleni, who out of his very busy schedule, but took time and joined us in this very important webinar. There's a saying that the greatest gift you can give someone is your time. We are very grateful to our VC and Principal that he has honored us with our presence, with his presence, as well as the warm welcome remarks that he made. I also wish to thank our DVC academic, Professor Crawford in absentia, and the entire senior management of the university for their support and also allowing us to have this webinar. The work that Dr. Baloyi and Professor Francis and Professor Mashau are starting is essential, and it is pivotal for strengthening our democracy. The proposed center, which is the Center for Legislative Research and Advocacy, is not only going to benefit our country, but the continent and the entire world. So their continued support, the senior management will ensure that this project is successful. Our gratitude also goes to the Acting Secretary to Parliament, Ms. Baby Kyawa, for granting permission to our colleagues from Parliament, our presenters, to participate in this webinar. I also wish to express our greatest gratitude to our most valued invited guest today, the Secretary of the National Assembly, Mr. Kaso, the Secretary of the National Council of Provinces, Advocate Pindela, and the Division Manager for Knowledge Management and Information Services, Dr. Gabriel. Colleagues, we know that you have a very busy schedules, but because you value what the University of Venda is proposing and planning to undertake, you prioritized our call and request. On behalf of the university, we are humbled and we thank you for these enlightening presentations, for helping us to understand the work of the Parliament and how it functions, as well as the information about knowledge management and information services. To us, this knowledge you've shared with us is fundamental. It is indispensable because the Parliament serves the society, and therefore the society should have a clear understanding of how it functions. In fact, I am reminded of the late Kofi Annan, who once said that, I quote, "Knowledge is power, information is liberating. Education is the premise of progress in every society, in every family," close quote. So today, colleagues, you have empowered us. You have educated us. In Malcolm X's word, he once said, "Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today." So I want to thank you for even for the proposed research areas that our colleagues should focus on, which will benefit the country and beyond our boundaries. I also wish to thank Dr. Baloyi, Professor Francis, and Professor Mashau for initiating this project and also organizing this webinar. Colleagues, this is an essential work that you have started, and you have my support all the way. I also want to recognize and thank our senior professor, Professor Ekose, the Director for Research and Innovation, for giving this initiative the green light to be established at Univen, as well as the ongoing support that we always enjoy from his office. I wish to thank our Professor Nishandama, our Director for Community Engagement at Univen. Prof, this is just a beginning of a long journey to a well-established world-class center. So your continued support will play a vital role to accomplish that goal. To all the colleagues who are here with us today, our students, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank you for your time. I know we are all busy, and I wish to thank you for your hunger for knowledge and to be educated. And I think you will actually agree with me when I say we really actually got educated today. Lastly, I'd like to thank our program facilitator, Professor Mashau, for being kind when asked to direct this webinar. Thank you, Prof, for guiding us through this webinar and also ensuring that everything goes as planned. Ndolobua, I thank you all. Over to you, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Prof. Now I will give time to Professor Francis, Director, Institute for Rural Development, to give closing remarks. Prof. Francis, time is yours.
Thank you, Prof. Mashau, and thank you to all the speakers before me. Mine is a very short expectation from you because I think a lot has already been said. Colleagues, you agree with me that this has been a very rich and enriching platform for all of us, especially at Univen. I would like to believe that we have listened attentively. We have identified that there's a challenge before us to distill the research niche areas that should be adopted by the new center. It has also been indicated that this is work in progress and that this is the first engagement we have just had in our quest to engage a wide range of stakeholders, starting from grassroots communities, moving up to local government, provincial. We have already engaged the national structures, and we also intend to engage the Pan-Africa Parliament. We have identified quite a number of aspects, I think, here. One of them being that I think we have also demonstrated through this webinar that it is possible for any other unit of the university to find ways of connecting with critical stakeholders in the course of constructing that particular unit. As we also move forward, it has also come quite clear that the center needs to start looking at how best it can move towards formalizing its relationship, especially with the knowledge management and information services, particularly the research services unit of that component. We can only hope that the center will definitely remain very much linked or connected to the knowledge management and information services, so that at the end, the niche research areas that get adopted later are actually informed by the critical stakeholders. And only when that happens can we then say indeed that this is a stakeholder-owned center for legislative research and advocacy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Prof. Francis, for the closing remarks. Colleagues, thank you very much for attending this webinar. We are now saying goodbye to you and have a lovely day ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. And
Thank you very much.
Bye. Take care. All the best.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Have a wonderful